I don't know of any dab that I've taken personally. I mean, there may have been something where I didn't even notice, but there's definitely been nothing that I was knowledgeable of. I mean, even
There's
people.
one I'm not proud
You're just
of.
saying that because we're still recording. Yeah.
Do you remember? Did you guys remember when I did? Well, I didn't do it, but when I was like, I fell off, literally laying on the top of Etchelet.
Literally,
I was like,
top.
I was literally on the top of it, and I slipped on some
I
ice, like standing up.
Yeah.
And I didn't. And people were like, "Dude, we'll give it to you." And I'm like, "Fuck no, I didn't actually send that shit. I was still like actively
That's
climbing.
mad respect.
Like, I was like standing up, but my hands were still on the rock, like. And I was like, and I honestly, I never went back to go do it. And still to this day, I'm like, no, I never did actually. I'm not going back because I didn't want to climb it again. I was like, I'm done. I've done my thing there. It's a terrible boulder. I'm never coming back here. I was like, I'm done.
Shoulders still in your socket. Yeah. Dude, when I did Mandala, I mantled it and then it was just tons of snow and I unmantled and jumped off. Like, I don't know. I mean, I mantled it. I'm like there, but I just.
Okay.
No.
Yeah.
There's no room. I mantled, my foot's there. You can watch the video. I'm like, it's just.
So you've never.
It's like
never
it was
done
getting
the
dark.
Wow,
the snow.
I
mean, basically, that's what I'm saying. It is one of the reasons why I really want to do the sit, dude. Is I'm like, fuck,
gotta
like,
prove it,
dude. I would have gone swimming through that snow, man. Be like, someone come get me. Like, I might not get off here on my own, but someone send a rope up. I don't care. I'm here.
Good Temps crew, back on the pod. How's it going, guys?
Good.
We're good.
Good.
Psyched to be here.
Everyone's here. Okay. Austin, good internet connection. Back full time now. That was the only complaint we got from the drop was we wanted more Austin, but internet connection was kind of bad. You're here to talk shit. Yeah. Okay, just a reminder for everyone, Good Temps, reoccurring series that will come out at least once a month, and it will always have the same crew. 3 of the most knowledgeable, psyched, general heavy hitters in climbing today, Carlo Traversi, Will Anglin, Austin Hoyt, and me, the world's greatest climbing podcast moderator, Josh Horsley. And you guys had an amazing launch last episode. I was blown away by just positive comments, support. Everyone seemed psyched on the format, and that made me psyched too, you guys, because I just had a freaking blast, and I want to keep doing it. So, yeah, episode number 2, good to start out on a high note. And I will say that we got one bit of negative feedback, and that's that we didn't shout out Brooke Raboutou's send of Excalibur 15C. Now, before we get into it, I just want to point out we're not exactly a news show. Yes, we will. I mean, look, of course we want to talk about whatever big thing happened in the past month in climbing, because that's what we would do if we were all having a beer together. So, and that's basically what we're doing now, but with coffee. But we're not exactly going to be your news source. Like, so if we don't bring up your favorite news story, sorry, but we're just going to choose to talk about the ones that really resonate with us and not every single one, and really use it as a launching point to all the other fun things that we want to chat about, and we always do. So with that said, Brooke, well, congrats.
We are not a news source, but just so everyone knows, we did drop the ball on Brooke, and
yes,
if there was any news that we should have been going over, that was definitely the one. And apologies to Brooke, apologies to everyone. This is probably the last time we'll apologize for not covering the news, but we definitely dropped the ball on it. So.
Yeah, that was a significant oversight. Our bad.
Yeah, but good job, Brooke. I mean, yeah, okay, it's better late than never, but luckily that will go down in history, so this will be permanently a news story. Brooke did Excalibur. It was the first female ascent of that climb and of any 515C or what is that, 9B plus ever. Excalibur is this gorgeous wall in Italy. It looks kind of like a long boulder problem. At least that's why I've never been there, never tried it, probably never will. And I gotta say, it maybe did suit her in the sense it looked kind of maybe a little fingery, but really what I was thinking is that almost looks like a comp wall, right? Like some kind of consistent, I don't know how many moves, but it looked it looked like you could put it on the stage at the Olympics, and she got silver there. So not a big surprise, but I make it sound like I'm taking something away from it because it was her style. But
I'm
good,
not
good
quite
job,
getting
Brooke.
the comp
Incredible.
wall thing, Josh. I gotta say it's kind of a flat panel. There's no volumes. I'm
Yeah,
not,
it's all crimp.
you know, like yeah, it's all crimps.
Yeah.
I don't know about that,
Cordo.
dude. There's no Cordo moves.
Okay, just the size, just the size, right? Like
It's a
like
shorter
this idea
panel,
that
yeah, yeah.
She's
Yeah.
I see the
yeah,
vision.
yeah.
It looks hard. It looks
It does.
gnarly.
Yeah, so for just talking about Brooke's ascent specifically, obviously seems like a really hard route, and mainly because of how many people that have tried it that haven't been able to do it. There's and also some, you know, I think it was Will Bozzi did the second ascent, correct? And it took him considerable effort to kind of put that together. And it's always an indicator of, you know, people throw grades out for stuff. A first ascensionist throws a grade out. It's really hard to say where things are going to land, but I think that one specifically, we just saw a lot of people traveling there to try it and either took considerable effort to get it done or, you know, or didn't do it essentially. And that always, to me, makes something stand out a little bit more than others. And seeing Brooke put the time into that one and get it done is rad. And I just want to, a little more of a personal anecdote. I climbed with Brooke in Salt Lake City at the CWA show, like shortly after she got back from Italy, and I climbed with her on a board at the Waltopia booth, and she was just on another level. Like I've climbed with Brooke a lot over the years, and even when she was like tiny, you know, at the spot back in the day, and I was completely floored. Like I couldn't even come close to keeping up with her, even on the most like Carlo-esque moves, I would say. It was just like, wow, this is sick. So I was just like, this is crazy. This is cool to see. You know, I was super stoked for her. So shout out to Brooke.
Yeah. She is really so good.
Yeah.
Like incredible climber in so many different styles too. Yeah, it's really inspiring to watch for sure.
Wait, I want to know what this Carlo style-esque move is on the board that she was still smashing. What's a Carlo-esque move that you were
just like, you know, stuff that's maybe like I'm pretty good at keeping my feet on when I'm get really, really extended and just keeping tension between my hands and my toes, especially in positions where like I don't have like compression in any way, like where you're basically just kind of laid out. And, you know, she was able, her like tip to tip tension is the best I've ever seen of anybody. Like it's incredible. Like to see how extended she could get out of compression basically and still keep tension on toes and like keep the feet on, and just her like her ability to move really far distances without losing that tension at all is it was just like, wow, I've honestly never seen anything like that personally, because it's something that I try and pay attention to a lot in my own climbing, and I pride myself on, and she just completely annihilated me.
To say the same thing in a slightly different way, like her ability to use her maximum range is insane. It's like it for a lot of folks, as they start getting to kind of the extremes of either like small or big box, depending on the moves, you start to see like the level sort of drops off. And for her, it just doesn't. She can do the hardest moves you've seen at full tip to tip, or in like a tiny little ball, or going from a tiny ball to complete maximum span.
What's her dimensions? What, like, you guys know what her ape is, or like how tall she is, like roughly?
I don't have the exact. Yeah, I know. I mean, she's pretty short. She's, you know, like 5'2", 5'3", something like that, probably. But I mean, I guess I say short. It's everything's a comparison. You know, I think there are other female climbers that are shorter, but you know, there's other female climbers that are taller. I think she's definitely on the shorter end, but you know, hasn't really seemed to stop her for the most part. So
something I'm curious about when I see Brooke go and do, you know, Excalibur, is I'm like, why did she go that route? Maybe that's why I was pointing out the idea that I thought maybe it like fit her style. Like when, you know, she's just been on one. She goes to the Olympics. She's cruising around. She's in Bishop, crushing. Wherever she goes, she's crushing. But dude, Italy is far. Excalibur is hard. Like, do you guys know how she decided to set her sights on that. Like that's kind of, I won't say it's arbitrary, but when the world is your playground, like I wonder why she ended up there.
I mean, I think it fit her style. You know?
When there's a route that you're psyched to try that you think you can do, I feel like you'll just travel to try it at least, right? Like that's why people go and try climbs in general. If you think you could do it, you're gonna pay the money to go and try.
Yeah, it's a beauty, that's for sure. Well, I don't know, any comments from you guys about just that closing of the gap in men and women and difficulty? Because
I saw a stat that it was her first ninth grade route as well. She skipped all of it just straight to that one, which is fucking crazy.
Yeah. I don't know. Do you think that's because of just her lack of time on rock or lack of time on sport? Like it is a wild thing to skip a freaking number grade ever, but at that level going, I think it was 14C to 15C. Like, I mean, I've never even tried 14C, but my thinking is that there's quite a gulf between 14C and 15C, even more so than like 13C to 14C.
For sure. Like I said, I'm mostly a boulderer, but I've only done 14A, and the thought of going from 14A to 14C even is like ridiculous to me. Like 14A was hard enough.
I think you're selling yourself short, dude. I think you could easily do the 14A to 15A gap jump.
Oh god, maybe Jaws.
You
maybe Jaws.
You need a couple days on the spray walls and stuff, doing some circuits. You know, maybe a tread wall or two, and you'll be right there.
All right, well, I'm gonna use that as motivation.
But honestly,
now.
just don't try any routes until you find a 15A that you're stoked on. You know.
Oh, there you go.
I think that's. I mean, the gap jump is obviously impressive, but it really just comes down to what you're putting your time and energy into, and it's obvious that. You know, Brooke would have filled in that gap over the years if she had just been outside sport climbing more and trying more sport routes, and she just didn't, you know, and, you know, to say that the progression is like immediate is, you know, that's not the case. You know, the progression's been happening for years. She was capable of climbing 15A, I'm sure years ago, climbing harder than that years ago. It was just, you know, seeing the proof in the pudding essentially when she climbed Excalibur. And it's like a mark in the sand of like, okay, now I'm here, even though I wasn't really able to show that progress, you know, outdoors over the last couple years.
But that's kind of a wild thing to do. It's one thing to have people like, you know, Carlo, you're like, oh dude, Austin, you could totally get get up like a 15. You can make that jump. It's one thing to hear people say, oh, you know, Brooke, you're strong enough to go do a much harder climb. It's very different to show up, or not just to show up, to travel around the world, to book a ticket and have in your head, like, I'm going to go do 15C, something that's never been done by a woman before on a climb that is notoriously difficult and has shut down some of the best climbers. I hear what you're saying, Carlo, but it's like, there's something really impressive about also drawing that line in the sand.
It's because you're letting the numbers get in your head, man. You just got to have that confidence and not worry about it, you know? Like I really don't do that, you know? Like I really try to not let the number of it get in my head at all. It's just like, that looks cool. I'm going to try that. And like, I feel capable. Let's go, you know? And I think Brooke has that mentality, you know? She's coming off of a super successful Olympic kind of, you know, program that she was on essentially. And she was climbing really, really well. And she just has a high level of confidence in where she's at, you know, and she set the sights high, you know? And I think at that top end, that's what you got to be doing. You got to set the bar really high for yourself and just go out there and try and get it. And what, you know, what's going to happen? Like you're going to fail sometimes, you know, some things aren't going to work out, but ultimately that's not the end of the world. You know, that's kind of how it goes.
Definitely looking forward to see more from Brooke's outdoor era.
There's a lot more coming. I already know this.
Yeah.
I'm kind of surprised that the first 15C by a woman is something that is so short and powerful. Maybe it's just a cliche, maybe it's a stereotype, but I often think of women being better at kind of the longer, maybe there's more options for different sizes on sport climbs. You know, just, I don't know, when you have something very straightforward, very thin, very bouldery, it's just not typically what I would have guessed the first 15C by a woman would have been. So props to her on that. But also it makes me wonder, is there, when I think of 15D, I think of long, pumpy routes. Like I'm trying to think, I can only think of 3 off the top of my head that exist, and they are long. And just kind of interesting also thinking about seeing more of these routes in this style, like just shorter, more straightforward, bouldery. And yeah, I don't know. You guys know of any projects out there that's in that range that is maybe, I don't know, not an
I got
Enduro
one.
Fest?
Right to the left of Jaws, the Bill Clinton project. It just waits.
Why is it the Bill Clinton
Oh,
project?
I have no
I
clue.
hear the name.
I wish I knew.
I've heard of it. That's one I've heard of.
I've heard of that one too.
And
I've seen it.
Tristan are
Yeah.
from over there. It sounds hard.
Yeah, it sounds like it's possible though, which is kind of surprising but pretty sick.
Rope up, Austin.
So yeah. I need to.
Dude.
Yeah, you know what? I believe in myself. I'm confident.
You should, dude. You should.
Thank you, Carlo.
I believe. Yeah.
Goes straight from 14A to
There you
15B. Yeah.
Now that's the gap jump we're talking about here.
Now we're talking.
Oh god.
Well, you guys, assuming we did Brooke justice again, huge oversight. I thought that this idea of her excelling in both bouldering, sport climbing, and I feel like that there's not as much crossover as Carlo just saying hop on the spray wall for a little bit. I feel like those are pretty different things. Brings me to one of the other big topics that I think we should not miss, otherwise people will text us very angrily, is Adam Ondra flashing Lexicon, which is an E11, which has some other numbers after that, trying to talk about how hard the grade is. I don't know. We can get into E grades, but it was impressive because there's only a few E11s in the world. There's one E12, and he flashed it. I was very impressed. Carlo, you were not impressed. So rather than me saying why I was impressed, I just want to toss it out there. Hopefully, Ondra
I never said I wasn't
Yeah.
impressed. That's not the case at all. For sure, I pretty much anything that if Adam Ondra pulls onto the wall, I think I'm impressed no matter what. It's just the nature of his climbing. But and you said, we're not going to get into E grades, but it's like I don't even know if I can discuss E grades because I still don't understand them. And I know from people that climb and use the E grades that they still don't completely understand them. So maybe someone can help us out there with understanding E grades a little better, but they do seem a little bit undefined in some ways. But speaking specifically to Adam's ascent, I mean, it's an incredible ascent. Don't get me wrong here. Like, I mean, he continues to just prove that he's probably the best to ever do it, the best to ever kind of do all of the climbing things. From competitions to, I mean, it's literally everything. He just hasn't done like ice and alpine and stuff, but and I guess he hasn't deep water soloed at all. So I hope he doesn't go ice and alpine. I mean, he's so good at the pure rock climbing. He just needs to stick with that. But and the other,
let him take it to the big walls, dude. Give him a shot. Who knows what's possible out there at 15,000 feet doing 15.
It's hard to try hard on that stuff though when you're dealing with like snow and ice and high elevation and other stuff. But who knows? I mean, I don't know what Adam's motivated on in the long run, but I think the ascent's really impressive. I just think that specifically for that one, it didn't like strike me as anything super crazy for Adam because of how much he has on-sighted at above that level. It's just, and that's, it speaks to his abilities as a climber. And I'm like, he has on-sighted so many routes way above that level that, it's scary, but his confidence that he has in what he's capable of, and it being a flash too, getting a lot of beta, other things, he knows what he's capable of and what he can do. And I think that does take some of that fear element out of it. And, he's a bold climber too. He's not like somebody that shies away from fearful things. He's taken some massive whippers on stuff and is not afraid of runouts, I would say. And so to me, it was just kind of like, it's an incredible achievement, but it's also just kind of, it fits right into what his capabilities already are. I didn't really feel like it pushed the limit of Adam at that point. So, and like I said, I think it just speaks to who he is and what kind of a climber he is already, but that's my only point to it. Not to say that it's not an impressive achievement in any way. It's like, obviously I think I would be very terrified, going for a flash with that big of a run out, on gear and stuff like that. That's especially too, like now that I'm a dad, I'm like, that stuff seems really terrifying to me. And he's a dad as well. So I'm like, man, that definitely levels things up a bit. So.
Yeah. I'm going to take the other side. I actually, I'm not taking the other side because you said it was really impressive. But here's why I thought it was wild is it's E11, which basically is some combination of difficulty and danger, right? Like, I mean, that's basically, E's supposed to encompass everything, right? So I think it comes out to around like 14 minus difficulty, something like that. They said, and then potential ground fall from the top, which sounds really bad because the top is way up there.
You'll just die.
Like,
yeah, no big deal.
Just die, Maybe like shatter your both legs, But anyways, so to me, I was thinking about this where it's like, oh, dude, he must have so much margin, right? Like 14A. Like, okay, great. 14A. Dude has probably on-sighted more 14As than I've even, seen in my life. Like he just goes around the world and does everything. But when it comes to flashing, I was just having this, I was like thinking about what it'd be like to flash something that's that dangerous and that hard. And you know how like you'll spiral when it's your first try where like you'll get a handhold, like someone will tell you a handhold's like a jug. And then you're like, oh dude, like this isn't that good. Like, am I on the right one? Or like, and maybe like your foot pops a little bit and you catch yourself and then having to like plug gear in, being like, is this exactly how it's supposed to be? Like, I haven't weighted this yet. And so just stacking all of that and then staying calm. And then even though 14A, he has a bunch of margin, I mean, maybe you guys know better than I, but what I found is like the harder climbs get, even if I have a margin on them, like there's still more like risk in each move typically. It's like, it's easier to fall off of a V11, even if you're a V17 climber, than it is for like a V11 climber to fall off of a, what would it be? Like a V7 or something. Like harder climbs are harder for more reasons than just like, oh, I'm so strong. It's like I'm a robot. And so I just thought it was really a big nod to how, his confidence, like you were saying, Carlo, just like the ability to like execute no matter what, always no hesitation, perfectly, even when everything is on the line. I feel like he doesn't get a lot of credit for being bold. And dude, he's bold as well as strong and capable. And I don't know, man, when I ran that scenario in my head, like what it would be like to kind of get a hold a little wrong, not sure if your placement's good, and then put it all on the line on your first try with holds you've never grabbed for those last dynamic moves at the top. I don't know. Kind of got me. Hand sweating just talking about
I mean, he's bold, but he doesn't strike me as a reckless guy. Like we're talking about Adam Ondra. He knows what he's doing and knows how to pick them too. He's notorious for waiting years, like picking a thing and being like, I'm going to wait and on-site that thing. Like he's very calculated. He knows what he's doing. And to your point, Josh, about the margin and as things get harder, there's still risk involved. A lot of that I think has to do with style too, where if things kind of stay in your box and the movement's relatively static or their holds, even if they're dynamic moves, were like, but it's off a hold that theoretically, if you missed, you could reverse or, reestablish the hold or something like that. Because there are definitely things where the nature of the movement is risky, even if it's not unsafe. And like you can just very easily mess that stuff up. And so my guess is that his calculation on that particular climb was like, I'm going to do it. Not like, oh, this could be bad. I think if he felt like that, he just wouldn't do it.
I don't remember the climbing in the video like exactly, but it did look like a style that, he knew he could kind of like just kind of dig into, like obviously it's not like sandstone slopers with like really crazy body positioning and stuff like that. It looked like, small holds, kind of some in cuts and stuff, and maybe some off balance moves, but nothing that was like too crazy, something where you can really use that margin that you have and dig in. The other point that I had about gear too is that route, because it's so run out, you're not sitting there fiddling with gear while you're climbing. Like you're building like a nest basically, and then just going for it, and I think that that's easier than having a climb where the gear is like really shitty the whole way and you're like having to fiddle it, especially on a flash go. Like that would be more like more effort, in my opinion, as a trad climber, is to like have something where you do need to keep placing as you go, and you're constantly having to figure it out and sit there and fiddle with it, rather than like placing a bunch of gear and then just being able to climb and kind of go for it. And with a flash too, it's like, there's no more gear, so you're not worried about that anymore. You're just making sure you got good gear where you place it. And yeah, it's a huge run, but and you're committed from the get-go that you're just going to climb basically to the top. So I think that does change the element a little bit. And I don't want to get into a discussion about how impressive Adam's ascent is. I think it's not our job to qualify the impressiveness of these things. Like, obviously I think it's an incredible achievement, no matter what. I think he continues to to show us who he is as a climber, and it's amazing.
Yeah, I hear what you guys are saying. He's calculating. He understands what he can and cannot do. He could down climb, but we're talking about like a death fall. So I just want to like toss that out there, where it's like, no matter how good your calculus is, they're like I don't know, like the consequences are so high. And Austin, for all of us, we saw Adam kind of be the young kid known for like randomly, like he'd show up and climb the world's hardest sport climbs and be like screaming, and like we watched him kind of grow up. And so I feel like he really earned this respect from our generation. It's just like, damn, this guy's just gets better and better and better. And even when he seemed like a kid phenom, it's like, and they just got better and better and better. But I'm just curious what it was like when you came into climbing. Adam was kind of already the man. Like, how does your generation view Adam and what he's doing?
Like when I came in, he was already the GOAT, basically. Like, he was winning a lot of comps. He was doing all the hard boulders and sport climbs and everything. So I feel like in our generation, whenever we have GOAT debates, he's always a part of it, and like always has been. It was never like he's coming up, because none of us really got to witness that. Now we get to witness the people that are like coming up and competing with Ondra, and we're like, oh, does that person have a chance to beat Ondra? Which is, I feel like, maybe different, because before it was like, oh, can Ondra beat that person?
Didn't he just retire from comp climbing? Is he done? Did he like do that Prague World Cup? And then I didn't watch it, but you guys, I don't even know how he placed, but is he gone? Is he
done with
bouldering?
Like,
yeah, he was done bouldering. And if the Olympics decides to do the split categories, which I saw something where that said they're still not 100% sure how it's going to work. I saw like qualifying. A little background. I was watching the Magnus Mippo video with Amigos, and the German coach in it said that he heard that the Olympic Committee said that qualifiers was still going to be combined format, but then finals would be separate disciplines.
That's a terrible idea.
Yeah.
All right, we're definitely not a news show because we're just like saying we heard from this YouTube, this guy, he was speaking German. We don't really know
unsubstantiated claims here, but I disagree with that. Don't do that.
If that's
please.
how it's going down, that doesn't sound like a good idea.
It doesn't even make sense.
No, it doesn't.
Well, let's just put that into the air, into the ether. Please just separate medals. I mean, although my pushback against that is like guys like Ondra are freaking good at everything. Like, and Brooke is freaking good at bouldering. I mean, I kind of thought of Brooke as being, I think she did best in bouldering when she competes, and then she just did a 15C. So, in gymnastics, we would have medals for each different discipline, and then a combined all around medal. And, there's something to that. And clearly, like, if you're skilled flat out, period. You can even do E11s, whatever the hell that is.
I didn't hate the combined format in the
I
Olympics.
liked it kind of.
It's different. Like, it's definitely a different task. But I was surprised with how much I liked it, like how much I enjoyed watching it. From an athletic standpoint, it's insane for the athletes to have to compete like that. But it's fun to watch.
I would agree. Totally.
Yeah.
Well, Carlo, didn't you just compete recently? Were you doing a little bouldering? Yeah. They let you in. They didn't check your ID and say you're too old to compete.
No, man, I didn't have to pass any tests on that one. So I just showed up and they let me in. Although things have changed for sure over the years. This was my I think I counted it was like my 15th or 16th year at Vail, because I did 10 World Cups there over the years, and then I've done a couple of the National Cup Series comps that have been there more recently. I just like going to Vail. It's a fun place to compete, even though it's really expensive to be there. It's just a fun venue, just because the crowd's fun, and it's just like a really nice outdoor area, and it's kind of like right at the beginning of summer in the Alpine, and it's just nice. So I just enjoy going up there, and I like competing, even if I don't do as well as I want to do sometimes. But it's a good like kind of gut check for me too, to like just kind of see where I'm at on the plastic end of things, with the comp style bouldering and all that. And sometimes it's kind of a beatdown, and sometimes it's a little bit of a surprise. I always end up learning something from it though, for myself. So yeah, it was a good time.
What was the setting like this year compared to decades ago?
Yeah, it's a lot different for sure. I mean, I didn't make it out of qualifiers. That was the first time I think ever that I haven't made it out of qualifiers. I was pretty close. I had, like I've told people, I actually had a pretty good day overall, but I had a really bad warm up. Like I warmed up terribly. They have this little tiny warm up wall in the back, and there were like 70 guys in my session on this tiny little wall trying to warm up, and the wall's only like 7 feet tall anyways, and so it's like, or maybe even less, it might even be like 6 feet tall, and so it's really hard to warm up. And so sometimes I'm like, okay, I'll warm up a little bit back here, but then I'll just get started on the comp problems and try and warm up out there. And it turned out pretty much all 10 of the comp problems were either like, I'd say most of them started with like one not super difficult but like coordination move, essentially like some sort of a jump, catch, stab the foot, whatever. And those are really hard to get warmed up on, because you like, and also because of the stacks of people waiting in line to try them. You try one jump move and then you go back in the stack for 10 minutes. And so it actually took me, out of the 3-hour session, I didn't start to feel warmed up until about 2 hours in, which was like super unfortunate. And honestly, like I should have done better. I should have like found a way to warm up before getting there to the comp. I should have done a better job of that. And then the last hour I started to get warmed up, and I just started to like send like everything, kind of like I just started to climb everything. And then I basically ran out of time. Like I didn't even get to try 2 of the climbs. And then I did fall off. I fell off the finish hold of one of them. I just had a foot pop while I was matching the finish. And I think if I had topped that one, I would have been in, like barely squeaked into semis. So it was actually pretty close. Like I actually felt better than I expected. And it was kind of a little bit of a wave of where like I started the comp and I was like, wow, I'm terrible. I'm never coming to one of these things again. Like I'm totally too old for this shit. And then I started to warm up and I was like, actually, I feel pretty good. Like, let's keep going here.
Well, I wish we would have gone and live streamed it and had Will announcing
That would have been fun.
and giving all the details about.
And I would have done a perfect job, and everyone would have been happy.
Always.
Yeah, just a little shout out for that reel that went viral of you, Will. Just, trying to preach that climbing could be even more complex in the commenting versus just how it is today. But yeah, got a little bit.
I fully agree with that
aggressive in there.
statement. I fully agree with that. That is a great thing. We should not be pandering down, like we have been. And I agree. I think they kind of tried to do both. And I'd rather them just get a little bit more specific and refined with that feedback. And I think that's a great point, Will.
Yeah. Well, I was addressing and kind of conflating 2 different things in that clip, which I think was part of the issue, because I'm not backtracking on any of it. I 100% stand by exactly what I said, but I was talking about both the commentating and in general, the way that media portrays stuff. So I think what I wasn't saying is like, oh, we need to dive into this like incredible level of nuance and whatever in the commentary of a comp. Like that's not the time or place for it. For the commentating, it was more like, Carlo, what you're talking about, dumbing it down too much and being like too familiar with the athletes. That's something that I don't like. And it's tough because it's a small world, and inevitably folks end up everyone knows each other. And so it can come out in the commentary, but like, I don't like, there have been times when commentators have been calling professional athletes, like basically they're like pet little friend names or whatever, and talking about them like they're children. I'm like, no, like these are the best athletes in the world at this. Treat them with like a little bit of respect in that commentary, and the activity with respect. Like, don't overdumb it down. Like, don't make it anyway. And then with the media and everything, I think, one of the things that we were going to talk about today is like Mount Doom, most aesthetic V17. It's like, it looks like a really cool aesthetic hard boulder problem. V17, I don't know. Like, who knows? It's like, what, can we appreciate how cool that boulder problem is without having to like hang all of that on the fact that it's V17 or not? Like, I think that's the thing that I would like to get away from is a more, I would like to get to a point where we all collectively can appreciate accomplishments in climbing in more nuanced and contextual ways, like where it doesn't all have to come down to it. Because it seems like these days, if someone doesn't call something 16 or 17, no one's even gonna look at it, which is sad, because there's a lot of really cool stuff that goes down that, and even some of these 16s or 17s, it's like, I wonder if people are just calling it that at this point because it's the only thing that anyone will pay attention to anymore.
Well, I put that one on the docket. The reason why I put Mount Doom V17, just want to lead with that so everyone knows to turn up the volume because it's a hard boulder and that's all we care about, is because I really do like aesthetics, and it's sometimes frustrating when stuff gets put up and it is not aesthetic, and somehow I feel like aesthetics and hard are intricately mixed in this weird way. Like, of course you can find something that is hard and not aesthetic. That's like a one move on the ground contrived. You can just be like, make some limit. But I think that there's something deep in us about aesthetics and difficulty where even if you look at like mountain climbing, like Everest is tall and beautiful, so we want to climb it. The Eiger is like, like the North Face, like these stunning, imposing, beautiful things that are both like, they're almost like the beauty denotes the hardness. And so when I saw something like that come up, it just makes me want more of that. Like, I'd love if we head towards beauty and that difficulty kind of follows. And I mean, maybe I'm way off there, I don't know, but that's kind of my feeling, is that there's some deep link there, or I'd like to see that link more tightly woven rather than just heading just number big, because I think that there's something more impressive and beautiful about people chasing something that's beautiful and that it's hard because it's beautiful. I don't know, maybe I'm conflating there a little bit.
I don't think you're too far off.
That's my 2 cents.
Because like, what I feel like is, as I've gotten, maybe it's as I've gotten better, or maybe it's as I've climbed longer, but I feel more inspired by like the beauty of a line as well. I know when I first started climbing, like, I didn't really care if something was super pretty looking or if it was just hard or if it was a low ball, like this or that. As long as it was challenging, I was psyched to try it. And I still have that mindset now, but now I kind of find myself not willing to travel as far for something that doesn't inspire me, like visually as well as physically.
Do you feel like that's like the same for your generation all around, or do you feel like it's kind of different for everybody?
I think I think it's always going to be a little different for everybody, but I think maybe, at least for my friends and my, like, the people I hang out with, it's pretty similar feeling all around. I was probably like the latest bloomer on that front, where it's like, no, I still want to try that low ball because it looks really hard, like Adam was more inspired by the king lines a little before me.
Gotcha. I'm happy to hear that. I love to hear that, that the aesthetics and like the king lines still, rise to the top essentially, and that it's not just going to be a game of like super difficult sit starts into existing things, or like low ball chasing and stuff like that. I mean, I always said like we were so lucky to have somebody like kind of Chris Sharma paving the way for our generation, in that he chose things that were push the level of difficulty, but also were just incredibly beautiful lines, you know, and he was really selective with that. And I think it really like, it kind of set like an early precedent for what climbing was going to look like and the progression of climbing was going to look like for the future. And I think it's something that you know, maybe we don't celebrate as much with Chris, you know, in the long run. I mean, he's just a good dude too, which helps a lot. Like he wasn't, you know, he's just like a great guy, but he I just thought his selection of things that helped push at least our like the generation before me and then my generation forward was centered around these just really beautiful king lines, which is cool. So, and I'm happy to hear that continue. So,
well, you said like, you know, celebrate Chris for that vision bio. I actually thought you were going to say like celebrate those lines and that, you know, that aesthetic choice. And that's why I put on the docket was not just V17, but that, like, why aren't we talking about this being the most beautiful V17? And why isn't that? I mean, I've said this way too many times. It's just, I'll see some picture and will make me book a ticket, Austin, right? Like it will make me go like, I'm going to go to South Africa because of that. Yeah. Like, and so, you know, you see Mount Doom get done, cool Mellow vid, you know, always cool. But I was just like, damn, that looks, it was, I feel like it was named well and shot well. And that's like a little dark. Like it's a little, like the whole theme is congruent there where it's like a little metal. Yeah. I don't know.
Well, I think it's Carlo's point about like what Chris chose to climb. I feel a similar way about Fred Nicole in that, like, this is maybe an underdeveloped thought to bring up on a public podcast, but something I think about.
We'll put on Instagram too.
And make sure everyone sees it. Please don't. Whoever's editing this. But thinking about self-expression in climbing, and that's an interesting concept to me, and something that I feel like climbing as a community and an activity is always kind of like reaching for, but there aren't a lot of areas where that's super obvious and available. Like I think a lot of times people will lump in, like I'll talk about self-expression and it'll turn into fashion. Like, well, what are you wearing? And is that what, and I think I'm talking about it on a different level where I feel like people like Chris and Fred and Dave in particular, like those three are really self-expressive climbers in my mind. Like when you look at their careers and how they go about climbing, it's very singular to those personalities. And I think there's almost no better way to express yourself in climbing than to do a first ascent. Like, because it's one of the few places where we get to make choices. Or like even beta on climbs, like there is a way that is going to be the easiest for you. And that's not really a choice you get to make. It's a thing that you discover and then execute on. But I don't know anyone who's going to a boulder at their limit and doing a move a harder way just because they think it looks cooler to do, or for some reason. Like for the most part, we're all looking for the easiest way to get up the rock. And that's not necessarily, I don't see that as expressive of a choice. But to have a line or a climb strike you in some way to the point where you're like, I want to do what it takes to climb this thing, whether it's the location, like it's on some other continent or whatever, but like going through the process of having to actually climb the thing. And then to your point, Carlo, what I'm trying to say is like, what does that look like in Austin's generation? Like Austin, who are the people who are like 20 something right now who are out there like putting up new stuff, and what does that look like? Because that does set the tone moving forward of like where is climbing going.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, in the Northeast, I think it just kind of started with some, like this kid Patrick Daly, who's like a Crusher in Vermont just put up this thing in New York in the Adirondacks called I forget, I'm blanking on the name, but it's the V12 that looks incredible. It's highball and everything like that. Like, I think people like that. I mean, I try to put up some king lines when I can, but they're few and far between out here, which is a little unfortunate sometimes. But when I see one I get psyched on, like you said, I'll try to scrub it up. But there's not a lot of people in my generation, I think, that are psyched on developing, especially in the upper end. A lot of it seems to be like psyched on repeating, or like they're psyched on FAing something, but not psyched on going out and finding it and scrubbing it and like making it safe to climb on.
Well, as someone who has not done a ton of developing, I still believe that there is self-expression through what you choose to climb on and pursue. I know what you're saying there, Will, where it's like, if you still find the best beta, that's the best for you. It's more of like a discovery. But for me, when I look at climbs and chase them, whether locally or around the world, it's like I want to have that experience that I think will happen on a climb like that. So it could be trad climb, it can be a highball boulder, deep water solo. Like it doesn't matter to me. There's something about, like, I want to be there and have to be tested in whatever ways it's asking me. And typically that's why I think it's nice to have a bit of a, I don't know if danger is the right word, but like an airiness at least, like I'd rather do a 40-meter sport climb than a 4-meter one. And I think it's interesting how now with social media, what you choose to put on there kind of is your, like, this is what I want to highlight. And I remember for me, it was more like 8a.new, you have your kind of like logbook, right? And when I had this reflection of myself, and it's like, okay, what's the V11 that you rated 5 stars? Is it, I don't know, Schwerov Gustav, like this soft, like 2 foot off the ground thing in Waco? Or is it like loaded with power direct? That's like a striking, beautiful thing. And so like, I just think that, yes, you can do it developing, and especially for guys at your guys' level also, where like Carlo was talking about, making your mark as a pro and being like, look at that one, I'm going to figure that out. And that shows who I am. Still think that there's a lot of self-expression to be had of just where you choose to put your time. And then also, if you're going to have that whole social media presence, what you choose to highlight at any level of the game.
Yeah, I think Will's specifically talking about just like pushing the limits of the sport, and like where some of those people, have put their time in, in what lines they've picked into pushing those limits. And yeah, I think that, if you go to Fred lines, they're distinctly Fred a lot of the time. And if you go to Chris lines, they're very distinctly Chris. Like the lines that he was drawn to are almost like a bit of a reflection of his personality and character and how he kind of sees the world, and the same with Dave. Like Dave's climbs are very Dave. Like they are, if you know Dave, they just kind of, it just makes sense, that this is something that Dave was kind of drawn to and pulled into. So I think that's cool. I think it's a cool point. It is a cool kind of reflection of those characters in the climbing world, and I think it's just kind of naturally happens, like for me, when I find something new or see a boulder, there's just something about it and that draws me to it. And I do feel like it's like aspects of my personality and who I believe that I am that draws me to it, where it's like there's some element of like this simple beauty, but there's like another kind of layer of complexity that's kind of beneath the surface. And those are the types of things that really draw me in, specifically. But I think everyone has different things that kind of draws them to certain climbs and whatnot. And yeah, it's a fair point too. I mean, we're all drawn to different things, even if it's not at the top level of the sport, and yeah, it's not to take away from what people end up climbing on, it's just follow kind of what you're stoked about. But I do think it is fair. Like it is good to look and see what stuff you tend to put your time and energy into, and be like, yeah, that actually is kind of a reflection of like who I am as a climber and kind of how I operate, so and that may, you may decide that you want to change that. You may decide that isn't exactly, maybe the lines that you're going after aren't, reflective of who you think you are. and maybe there's a room for adjustment there. I don't know.
Hmm.
It's kind of deep.
That
How do you
was
get
pretty
this
deep.
deep?
That was
Oh,
here?
dude.
pretty damn
Food
deep.
for thought.
Yeah. No right answers to this, but
I mean, it's one of those things like you dedicate. I mean, not everyone does, but like you dedicate your whole life to a thing, you know, and you're like, what is this? Like, what the hell am I doing? And you know, looking at it that way is, I don't know if it's like me coping with having sunk 25 years of my life into this, but or if like no, like there is this real thing, and I like to think that there's this real thing because, like you said, like when you go to like something that you're like, well, this is a Dave Graham FA, and it's like known as that. You go to it, and you're like this is a Dave thing. Like, of course, Dave figured this out, and so like there's that reflection on that the person, but I think that's also where the sport itself gets pushed, where you know when Fred was pushing the limits, bouldering looked really different back then, and it was you know Fred doing Fred that opened up all of these possibilities for future generations of like, oh yeah, like when you see a wall that doesn't have holds on it or you don't think has holds on it, there is still something to be done there. Like all of us, you can compress things, you can do drop knees, you can whatever. And I think, you know, Chris did a similar thing, particularly with dynamic movement. I think he's like pretty famous for that. Kind of goes without saying, of just opening people's minds of like, oh, efficient movement can look different than what we previously thought that it could. And then you look at Dave and you're like, wow, I didn't realize my body could turn into that puzzle piece to fit that thing. And now all of a sudden, like my world gets opened up and I feel like I can see things differently because I've now interacted with this piece of rock that this other person interacted with. And I think that's a really cool way to look at contribution to climbing and like self-expression and how someone might go about a climbing life in an interesting way, and how the sport can get pushed in ways that aren't just like confined to the way that we currently view climbing. And it's like, well, just grab a smaller crimp or jump a little further and make the number go up. Like we're still in a place where I think we can expand our conception of climbing in a kind of a deeper and larger way than just making the same things we've always done harder.
Oh yeah, Arson, are you thinking about stuff like this? Are you thinking about this stuff?
Do you have
those thoughts of like, what the hell am I doing out here?
For sure, when I'm on a low ball, I'm like, damn, what am I doing out here? But I was going to ask, what do you think, like, I mean, if it's like generation to generation and coming into this one, right? Do you think that we'll see the coordination style or something define this generation? Like, is that what do you think that's what we're moving towards outside? Like, if we had Sharma's dynamic stuff, you know, Fred's ability to do these new boulders, is that what we're moving towards?
That's what I hope to see. I mean, you're the double clutch on Lucid, like it's so sick. Like taking, and I think that it's one of the. It annoys me when people try and disparage comp climbing because I'm like, you guys, like this is what's showing us the future of what's possible. Like, get out of here with that. So yeah, no, exactly. I think that's kind of what I'm getting at, and I want to see that more. And maybe, you know, all this repeating is this generation understanding how to apply those skills to these current challenges. And the more that people start to understand how this, frankly, like pretty new way of conceiving of how to solve movement, like how those things actually can apply in the real world, that it will start to open up all of our eyes to features and things that maybe can be uniquely solved with that type of movement. And we'll start to see this stuff that we've been walking past for decades that's actually just right in the backyard.
Yeah. So that's why I was going to pick on a little more. I'm kind of playing devil's advocate here, but I actually think it's an important point is when you look back in history and you look at Fred, like when I think of Fred, I think of crimping and pulling hard, you know, in a level that hadn't been seen before. But now in hindsight, it's not like it was crazy unattainable, like some kind of genetic freak that no one could ever repeat. And you look at Chris blazing a trail with dynamic movement, which, by the way, Will, I don't know if people really do recognize that he was kind of the guy. I mean, I think maybe we know that, but I'm not sure if the younger generation would be like, oh yeah, like look at 3 Degrees of Separation or something like that.
That was a complete departure.
Just to speak on Fred real quick, there is some things that I've seen from Fred, that I saw from Fred climbing with him over the years, that it specifically in like this just like lock off power that I have not seen replicated since then. And that's not to say that like he's had a very specific skill set with that I feel like maybe we haven't quite seen somebody who's capable of that. And so I just want to emphasize that I do think a lot of people over the years have been able to achieve a certain, you know, strength level in certain things that, you know, it's not to say that everyone now is just way stronger than he was. You know, I don't agree with that completely.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
go for it, Austin.
I was just gonna say,
ahead,
do you remember the video of Fred locking off Shozaloza in Rocklands? That's insane.
What the?
No one does that like that.
That is insane. Yeah. Well, also because it's way easier to just swing up and grab the hold. Okay. Well, I'm just going to completely ignore what Carlos said and continue on with my point. So
I'm taking down big media today, dude. That's what I'm doing.
Big media's struggling here, painting broad brush strokes that don't work out, but it's going to keep on going. So you've seen people discover these styles over the years that perhaps were, maybe their morphology suggests that they could do it, or maybe they just, I don't know, maybe they just invented or noticed something, like, you know, Chris being dynamic, like, I don't know, maybe just had predisposition to it or discovered it, and he really took it to a level that hadn't been seen before. And so now we're casting a wider net. Like before, maybe we had guys that would just showcase the style, maybe genetically, and then kind of head in that direction and develop things that maybe at that time only they could have that vision to see. And now I've heard this said in kind of a brutal way, where sometimes they'll look at the younger generation, just say like, I don't know, everyone's kind of like good and all kind of good at the same thing and all kind of good in general. And that we don't have these standout both styles and personalities like Dave Graham, Chris Sharma, Fred Nicole. And so is that because that's just flat out wrong, and we are going to see people uncover new styles or new abilities that are still outside our vision? Or is it just that things were the bar was kind of low, and then you had these, you know, amazing dynamic climbers or sloper masters that then would broaden that bubble, and now we're all kind of like, you know, in there, and it's going to take some absolute genetic freak to push some limit. Do you guys see what I'm saying there?
People do say that, Josh, but I do think that there's still people that are rising above kind of the general level has gone up substantially. So there's like a higher base level, but there are still like quite a few freaks that are out there. Like I said, I mean, like Brooke stood out, you know, like massively in my opinion, compared to people that I've climbed with. And, you know, I've said the same thing about her brother, Sean, over the years, climbing with Sean. And, you know, Sean's a great example of someone that has put significant effort into developing things that, you know, kind of like help push the sport forward and move things forward. And Sean Bailey as well, you know, all of those guys are doing a lot on that front. So I do think there are some freaks in that regard that stand out, but yeah, there's a much bigger base now. So it's a little bit harder to feel like it's this huge, you know, departure from before. It was like, you just have a smaller group of people that consisted of the base, and then there was just a couple outliers that were coming out of it. And so it's a little bit harder to see through all of it when you've got a lot of people climbing at a very, very high level, and there's only a few still that are much, much higher than that. So
yeah.
All right. Uneducated big media struck down again. No, I agree. And it also made me think of that visual that you painted last time, Carlo, of run and jumps on El Cap and or on big walls, and doesn't seem that insane, but actually seeing what that looks like and having someone take that skill set and apply it. And, just to loop it or link it back to even Adam Ondra, like you could have looked at him as a kid and been like, wow, he's a good sport climber. But I will say again, I was very impressed with a flash of a traditional route that had a huge danger element. And I think that is, maybe it's not a brand new thing to have happened. Maybe it's just, excellent example of that style, but that does show like an ability of taking multiple abilities and applying it in a new way that we hadn't seen before. Sure. So now I hear what you're saying. I just don't want to always agree. I want big media wants to try to carve out.
I want to go back to Austin's question where he asked about where we thought the sport was going, in terms of progression. And I would say the three of us older crew probably have, the least accurate, representation of where that's going to head. Like Austin, your generation is going to be the one that's going to tell us where it's going to go. We could sit here all day and speculate, but it's what you're motivated by. It's the boulders that you find. It's how you apply those skill sets that are going to paint that future for the rest of it. I know for me, I've always tried to, that's why I still do comps and I still climb on comp style stuff in the gym, is because I still want to be at a high level wherever that progression ends up going. And, I think ultimately it's going to be the kids that are going to show us where it goes, but I still want to be able to keep up. And so I'm still trying to keep up on the comp style stuff, the triple clutch, flip around 360, random things, it's like, it gets harder and harder, but I think it's fun to kind of still be able to maintain a high level in all of those things. But ultimately, like, you guys are going to, show us where it's going to go, and I don't know. Like, I don't know. I've seen it kind of go a lot of different ways, but I think it's going to be a combination of all the things,
Yeah, for sure. I was just sitting here thinking about all the projects I have. I was like, man, are there any that I can think of that are like double clutches? I was like, damn, a lot of jumping.
I mean, the holds keep getting further apart, so that's what makes things hard. So
Austin, who are some people that you think kind of typify the new generation from a kind of a style standpoint?
I think it depends on what you define as like the new generation, because I think the people like Nathaniel and both the Seans, like, their style is pretty similar to the style that like Adam or Noah or I climb in as well. And I think you can kind of group all of it into one, if you guys think so too, if you can kind of group all of it into one generation. And I think there's a lot of people, like you said, that are good at the style that's most prevalent now. Like, it is kind of just that board style. It's kind of coming back. It's like that board style, but the moves are bigger and the jumps kind of require you to maybe be a little more coordinated sometimes.
I just group everybody that's younger than me as like kids, and that's the group.
Okay, fair. Yeah,
those are all kids.
5-year-olds.
No, I'm just kidding. I know there's a big difference. That was the thing that I realized too at the comp, is that I had kids that I competed against coming up, like when I was still kind of felt like I was slightly aging out of the comps, but still doing really well, like making finals and stuff. There were like kids coming up, like Nathaniel, Zach Gala, Drew Ruana, like those kids were coming up in my last kind of nationals finals that I was in. And now those guys are like out, like they're like almost retired, and there's like a whole new crew. And it's like, it's kind of crazy to me. Like, it was crazy for me to be at the comp and be like, wow, all the kids that I was competing, or the kids that were coming up when I was like competing a lot, are like retired, and now there's like a whole new group. So I'm very much aware that there's a lot of different generations there, but I think it's interesting that you say that you kind of group yourself in, because I mean, you're like, how old are you, Austin?
I'm 21.
Okay, so you're definitely younger, much younger than like Nathaniel. I don't know where I don't know. I know the Seans are probably like mid getting closer to like the late 20s, but more mid 20s and stuff. I can't remember exactly.
Ancient.
Yeah,
it's over.
I mean, when I was 21, that did feel kind of older for sure. But obviously nowadays that does still feels young.
Well, it seems to me like there always is an element of technology that leads where climbing goes. That there's vision, but I feel like vision is often combined with technology. It's like, hey, now we can put bolts in. So what does that mean? And you have to have young kids who don't feel like that's somehow anathema to what came before them, or maybe that's exactly why they do it, is because it's completely frowned upon. But and then you have like crash pads. It's like, okay, we can do this. Maybe there's nets, and so you can also see this with gyms and boards, and so there's this weird like interplay of like vision and technology both. Like you need a special person to have vision, but I think you also usually those special people are unlocking something because of the tools that are available to them. Maybe it's a knee pad, but like I think those go hand in hand.
Will, when are we gonna have a comp style board, a board that is specifically for training comp style moves?
Okay, so I get asked this a lot, and it's not that it's a bad idea, and I think I think that there are ways that it could be done, and that wouldn't suck, for sure. But in general, my thought is that it's kind of a misunderstanding of the nature of that kind of movement. And for me, what really stands out about competition style movement is the negative space. And it becomes really tough on like a board or something where you have to fill the space with enough things that there are enough possibilities to then turn into a database and whatnot, and that inevitably, like, and by nature of even just considering doing that, like you're carving out a huge chunk of what makes that movement, and then it just sort of becomes not that thing anymore, which is to kind of like totally take this some other direction. Like when I look at these little gyms that people are starting to build, which I think are sick, and I want to see more little gyms, you can't just, or I mean, you can, and people have and do, so this is not shade to them, but like just opening a warehouse and throwing in 6 boards, you can do that, but there's like route setting will never die. It's critical because you can do things with the space route setting that you just can't do on boards. And I don't think it even is worth trying to a certain extent, because it's just so much better when you can set it. Anyway, bit of a tangent, but
I like it.
That's how I feel about that.
It's not that it's a bad idea. I love that was the start of it. And then you tell me why you think it's a bad idea, but
but it's like I said, you could do it in a way that'd be cool and honestly like super productive. It could tick a lot of boxes. Like I'm not even saying that I'm not ever gonna do it.
Yeah.
But like those are the things that I think about when I start considering that.
I have an idea for how it can get done in like a cool way, but we don't have to go into it right here. But I do think it can be done in a way that would be like effective for everybody's training, essentially.
Let's chat off the air.
Chat. Yeah, we'll chat off the air.
Will might know a guy.
Yeah. I hear you know a guy that can do some
Temps
stuff.
collab.
Totally.
Well, I was talking about technology, or like this idea of that stuff leading the vision. And when we talk about comp style, what that really means is it's route setters and holds on walls, right? Like, it's kind of like an evolution of that. And Carlo, you are deep in all of those things, very, very deep. And just where do you think route setting goes? Like, I feel like that does, like when you bring a kid in and they're 5 years old and then you start putting them on these kind of climbs, like, what evolutions are we going to see in route setting, or maybe the holds that are on them that might lead towards new vision when they are 25 years old.
Yeah, I mean, we could do mini podcasts about route setting. It's honestly, I've probably put more time and energy and thought into route setting than I have my own climbing in the last 20 years. It's something that I deal with on a weekly basis, and I've set in a lot of places, and I care a lot about it. I think it's impossible to say for sure, but I've always gone back in my route setting philosophy to try and create more exploratory forms of route setting, like where the climber feels like they're exploring things while they're climbing rather than like trying to fit a specific box. And I've found that to be like, we talked about this when we were in Font this year, Josh, is that I love how Font, especially on the easier end of the scale, feels like an exploration on the rock, and you learn things in positions and movement and stuff. And I think that we have a long way to go before that becomes the way route setting is, kind of throughout the country or the world. I think you see it in certain gyms in certain ways, but overall route setting is not like that most of the time. And I think that that's kind of where the biggest progression can be had. And I think that you'll start seeing people just create a better base of technique and abilities, and a much stronger mental capabilities from the get-go if they start climbing from a more of an exploratory, kind of state of mind. And I think the route setting has a lot to do with that. That being said, setting that way is really difficult. Like, it's not something that's easy to do. You can't just be like, oh yeah, this is where it works. It's like you have to have somebody that really, really understands climbing movement, how the body operates, and how to basically like know how climbing works, but also know how the mind works. And like in my setting, I'm constantly thinking about how people are perceiving a move and how to kind of trick them into trying something new. Like, you don't want to shut somebody down, but you also don't want to give it to them too quickly. And so you basically have to give them just enough to like have them feel like, oh, this kind of starting to feel more right. And then maybe if I do this, it feels even better. And then it's like, oh, wow, I just found it. And it's like setting that on every move where it kind of like pushes them in the right direction, but doesn't give it to them, is a really difficult thing to do. But I think it's where setting can develop the most. And I think that especially on the easier end of the scale, I think we already get that a lot more on the harder end of the scale. So.
Ooh, I love that you put that much effort into route setting, and those moments when you feel like, when you feel is the word there, like a suggestion from the route itself, or, rock or whatever, to move a certain way. And then that positive reinforcement, when you get those on easier climbs, it's special and magical. I feel like there is less and less route setters who have as much of a background outdoors. And is that a good thing, a bad thing? Maybe it doesn't matter, but I don't know, maybe because Austin, you set too. I don't know if you're saying right now, but I know who hasn't picked up a wrench at one point or another? It seems like doesn't necessarily make you a route setter, maybe just a wrench monkey. But yeah, what do you think about like setters who maybe start indoors, Austin, stop indoors and do everything indoors, and they're not necessarily informed by nature? Like, maybe that's a way to unlock something in nature in a weird, like,
Josh,
roundabout
by the way,
way.
we're not using wrenches anymore. We're using drills, just so you know.
Yeah, impact drivers. Come on.
What are those?
No, go for it.
How does steam power a wrench? Or I mean a drill? Okay. Yeah.
No, I think that it definitely changes it up quite a lot. Like, I think when setters like kind of are closed-minded and don't go and experience what something outside could feel like, they're not going to know what, I guess, nature flows like. Because the flow between an indoor climb and outdoor climb is incredibly different to me. Like, you don't have things always exactly where you want them outside, and that's the difficulty of it. And a lot of the time in setting, you're going to have a foot exactly where you need it. And that's not really, like, quote unquote, that's not how rock climbing is all the time, right? I think that's a major difference between setters that only focus on indoor comp style setting and setters that are willing to explore all aspects of it.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Damn. I just love when I walk into a gym, especially like I find it in rope climbing even more. And it's like, I feel like I can on-site just as hard as I can red point on those sets of lead climbs that are just, it's like, and now my foot goes here, and now my foot goes here, and this is undercling. And it's like the most comfortable thing ever. And yeah, I know outdoors isn't always set perfectly, but damn, does it feel good to just,
Yeah.
smash around and feel like you know exactly what you're doing.
In the gym, it's like not even a suggestion sometimes. It's just telling you, oh, your foot has to go here.
Yeah. I think that's a kind of, I feel like what Carlo is getting at with the discovery portion.
For sure.
Not being just so completely railroaded into the setter's exact intention to where you don't get to figure anything out. You're just kind of getting punished until you make the right decision. This is something I've been thinking a lot about recently, because the language, I think, is always really interesting that people use to describe these things in particular. And a semantic thing that I've noticed over the last 20 years is I also route set. So just to call, like,
in the time of wrenches
or
in the time of drills.
So in the time when we were going from wrenches to drills and realizing that drills weren't the play and you actually wanted an impact driver, we would often talk about forcing sequences. And then, like, if you did anything other than that, it was like broken. And then one of my like main route setting mentors was Ward Byram. He's still a mentor, still alive, still route setting. Sorry,
friend of the pod.
Good clarification. Love
but he was the first person to kind of get me thinking. He's like, no, you're enticing movement, like, as opposed to forcing it. No one wants to be forced to do anything. And what I've been thinking about recently, because I have qualms with the current state of route setting, is I've started thinking about compelling movement and compelling climbers. Like, it's slightly different than enticing. And it's something that I feel like when I think about the boulder problems I like the most on rock, or the sport climbs, or the things in the gym, I feel the feeling that I feel when I'm enjoying them is I feel compelled. Like, certain things feel compelling, and even just like the visual presentation of like two things adjacent to another can be enough to compel me to explore what's going on there or something. And so that's what I've started to talk about, is like, when I walk into a gym, like, I want to be compelled both in the climbs that I approach and how to climb those things.
Well, I've told you this story, and it was that when I got brought into route setting, it was this idea of, no, put a foot here and honestly make it comfortable, Austin, like, and make it comfortable so that you are, I'll just use some language from you, Will. So you're compelled to take the side pull and give it opposition with a foot. And the concept there was that by compelling them into, quote unquote, the right way of climbing, which is kind of like railroading it too, though, and saying, like, this is actually really the only way to do it, and still make it a V5 instead of a V10 or something. That then when you went outdoors, it would be teaching you that if you get a side pull, that you look for that. You look for that foot. That it's like a teaching mechanism. And Carlo, when I think about our time in Font, and then I think about your ideas around exploring movement indoors, which I just love. It's definitely a different, it's like a shift in thinking, where it's like, no, maybe you can learn those skills indoors and then they would translate maybe even better to outdoors. But it's like a different almost pedagogy of like telling people how to learn how to climb.
Yeah, I try to think of it like, when I go outside and I'm looking for like new boulders and stuff, like I'll see features and like start to imagine how they could line up. And I've started to really pay attention to like what it is about like the way the features are arranged on the wall that like are inspiring to me in the first place. And then like when that problem solving starts to occur, because sometimes it's like, yeah, if I just get like 3 flat rails in a row and then like an easy top out, like there's no hoops that my mind has to go through to figure out how to do that. It's like, okay, I grab this one and then I reach up and grab this one, and it's like a ladder, it's like we know how to do that. And then there's obviously these situations where you just don't have enough features to be able to put something together. And then it's almost too far for your mind to like put the pieces together. And then somewhere in between, you've got this like layout of how the holds and the features are arranged on a wall that you don't quite know how they're going to work together, but you know, just kind of intrinsically that somehow they have to, like, somehow there's the right balance of like the pushing, the pulling, the spacing, the size of the features that should allow this to happen. And I think that that's now where I try to apply my route setting, is like, how can I arrange these holds on the wall that make everybody have that feeling of like, I know this is doable. This definitely works. Like, I just can't quite figure it out. And it takes a long time to get to that point to figure it out. And it's, there's no clear cut rule for that. It's very much just like a feeling that you're trying to like put together. And on the route setting side, that's really hard. Outdoors, it's easy because you just go look at something new. You're not going to change that. You're just like, oh yeah, that seems too chill. And it just doesn't really inspire me because I there's not many like jumps, at least in my imagination, to get to where this works. I know that it works. It doesn't even look that hard, and then there's other things where you're like, well, that's just a blank wall with nothing on it, like there's nothing to even put pieces together here. And whereas indoors, it's very much like I have the option to put anything on the wall that I want. And now how can I create this feeling for everybody while they're approaching it? And then being grade specific with it is also really hard, making sure that it's appropriate for all of the difficulty ranges that you're trying to appeal to.
I love route setting.
I
really
cool.
do. I love that those again, it's those feelings. I think it's like an underrated art form because there's literally beauty. There's the feelings that people have when they're on there. We could do like a million episodes on there. Okay. Didn't see that total tangent coming on the docket. That's why we're not a news show, because who knows where it will go. You guys, we don't have time for all the other things we put on there. I feel like maybe we should talk about the Mellow video competition, or I think there's a more clever name for that. It's like, is it the MRG, Mellow Rock Games? Is that what it is? I should have put it in the notes, but Mellow Rock Games. I should not tee it up, but because I haven't actually watched any of the videos other than Last Line of Defense with David Fitzgerald, but I believe it's a video competition with quite a significant prize as well. I want to say in the 5-figure range for winning. I can't remember how that's selected. Maybe you got to cast a vote via views or something like that. But yeah, what do you guys think? You guys watch any videos that were inspiring? I actually just want to start off by saying, just like seeing the encouragement of anything, like, having them put money towards the community to create something. We always talk about how just the idea of new things, like, I don't know if it'll work. Maybe this will be the first and last one of these, but it's not bad if it creates psych and makes people create and puts it out into the world. But yeah, Austin, do you get psyched on them? I feel like you're good at consuming climbing media.
For sure. I think I've watched every video. I might have missed one heat, but I think I watched every single one. I dig it. I think it's cool that they're pushing people to create some, I guess, longer form media. 10 minutes is still kind of short form, but longer than we get a lot of the times. I think it's cool that they're pushing storytelling and like cinematography. I like it. It's I think I have a few qualms with it, but it's new. Like, everyone's gonna have something, right?
What are your qualms, dude?
Okay, I was surprised that they have the videos as unlisted on YouTube, and like you can't just go watch them. That surprised me a little bit because I felt like even from like a business standpoint, like if they were just on YouTube, people would randomly find them, and then they would make their way back to the website anyways, being like, oh, what's Mellow Rock Games? I'm going to go look that up. So I think that surprised me. And I think the voting process, while it's like probably the best way to do it, could maybe be, I think the fact that like it was pitched as like an amateur competition, right? Or at least that's what I understood. I understood it as an amateur like competition with amateur videographers and stuff like that. And I think the fact that some of these pro climbers who have definitely more of a budget for a video are submitting in it is a little weird. Maybe there could be 2 different categories or something, but I mean, I'm not going to complain too much because I like watching all the videos. So
I think those are all fair points for sure. I only have really I haven't watched that many of them. I just haven't had time. I think it's a cool idea. I think I've always just been a little bit against making art like competition essentially, where it's just like now we're gonna like judge these pieces of art essentially that people create because I mean a lot of them are like I'm not saying every single one of them are like actual pieces of art, but I mean filmmaking to some degree is always artistic, and I feel like pitting them up against each other about which one's best and which one's worst or something like that always feels like it's like I don't know, an antithesis of what the process is about in the first place. So there may be a better way to like vote on the favorite essentially, that doesn't quite feel like it's like the same style of heat as like a athletic performance or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah.
How do you vote? What's the process for voting?
I think they just have a heat, right?
Yeah, it's just 4 videos against each other, and you get to cast a vote on their website.
For like one of them, yeah. And then whoever gets the most votes goes on to the next round.
Yeah, and then the finals is
which
just
I get.
decided
It's
by
simple.
the judge
It's
panel.
easy to kind of like be able to lay out all the heats. Yeah. It's easy to lay out all the heats. I think from like a marketing standpoint, it does make sense. I think it makes sense in a lot of ways. It's just, I guess I just fundamentally, I think I just feel weird about voting for bet. It's like every film has like some qualities to it that are cool and interesting, and others fall short in other ways. And it's like, it's hard to say sometimes like one's better than the other, and even at the end you're going to be like, is this really the best video, or is it just the one that was like most people's friends that also use Mellow voted on or something? I don't know.
For sure.
Who knows?
I agree.
Yeah, it's hard to say for sure.
Still, at least it's cool to see a new thing, and it's cool. I like just that it's promoting more. Yeah, 10 minutes is not that long form, but like more long form stuff. Like it's getting some of this stuff out of like 30-second reels and whatnot, and encouraging people to put a little bit more into their delivery of this, which I think is cool. I feel similarly about the whole kind of judgment of art thing. And yeah, if it, like to nitpick on it, sure. But it is cool to at least just see some people going for it and trying something new. And if they do it again, I'm sure they'll tweak it a little bit. And I definitely have a lot of empathy for just iterating and trying things. And maybe you don't nail it the first time or the second time or the third time, but it's cool to see people trying, and I hope they stick with it and continue to iterate and learn and continue to promote that kind of expression in the industry at large.
It's definitely like helps stoke kind of the creative fire, and I think that that's probably the most important aspect of it. Like anything that can kind of get that going is awesome.
Yeah, I like that you highlight that at the end there, Carlo, because I feel like I know what you're saying, where you shouldn't have to choose, or like there maybe the right way to say is that there's not necessarily winners and losers. There's a winner that people end up going for, because my hunch is that they're all pretty darn good. And yeah, just I like the stoking the psych, and it does feel good to get to pull this stuff off of something that might just end up on Instagram as a 30-second thing and give someone a chance. Because also, I don't know, someone might really resonate with a new style that we've never seen before. Just like climbing styles have changed over the generations, media styles have too. But it does strike me as being a touch unfair when you have someone like David Fitzgerald, who's a world-class climber and a world-class editor, all in one, posting against basically anyone, where if you had to hire him, it would be maybe as much as the whole competition itself. So not all I'm saying is, damn, that was a good film, and tough one to beat. So I don't even know if it won at this, because I don't even know how to cast a vote. I'm just casting my vote here as good job, good climb. Yeah. Okay, guys, I don't know. We could touch on Sung Soo doing Burden of Dreams twice.
Like that's pretty important.
I think the troll of Sung Soo.
Oh yeah.
Respect. That was a fun way for him to put that out in the world.
What do you mean? Tell me more. Why did Sung-Soo troll
Well,
the
he
world?
already did. He had already redone it, and then he posted the thing like, "Oh, like, is this a dab?" And we had already known because Austin spilled the beans.
Yeah, whoops.
But
well, no, we explicitly didn't spill the beans. We were like, we cannot talk about, like, because just to set it up better, Austin, you had been trying Burn of Dreams in Finland. Sung-Soo was there. And then after you left, he let you know, hey, I climbed it. Hey, I dabbed the first time, then redid it. And we were like, this is fascinating. We want to talk about it, but we can't be the one to break that news. Obviously, it's for him. And then he posted first where he did Burden of Dreams with a shirt dab, and the internet exploded, even though he had also gone back and decided to repeat it instead of just in his Instagram post. I don't remember what he said, Will, but it was something along those lines of,
there was no better way for him to pose an ethical question to the community than to already have the resolution, to it. And it was
interesting.
it was the best situation that you could have, and I'm so happy he took advantage of that opportunity where he's like, I already know how this ends, and I'm not concerned with what the comments are from the community, but I'm going to take this example and pose it to the community to see what people say. And it wouldn't have had that same effect if he'd have let everybody know what happened in the long run. He needed to have that time and space to allow people to have their comments and whatnot. And I'm happy he did. It was a great contribution to the community from an ethical standpoint and an understanding of ethics for the community that he did that. And I think that's a really impressive thing to know ahead of time and to like go and do that. And so I was stoked about that he did that. I thought that was rad, just because it was cool to see all the comments about what people thought and what they would do in that situation, and how many people were like, oh, I'll give it to you, man, I'll give it to you, or other people are like, yo, you dab, dude. Like, you got to go back. And it was just a really clear example, which was cool to see. And it was fun for us, like, obviously, because we know he went back and did it, and respect for, even without having posed it to the community, to just go back and do that and know that you want that perfect thing, and then just go do it is sick. I mean, that's incredible. So I was really stoked about that.
Well, you said trolling the world, and that's a very specific word. I mean, any more thoughts on that idea of putting that out there? I mean, Carlo, you took a very positive light to that.
I call it positive as well. I say trolling not as a not as a negative, but like that's what he was doing. He was just kicking the hornet's nest.
Yeah.
But it was good. I mean, it's
now we know who has questionable ethics.
Totally. I mean, we got you.
We got all
it's
you.
Worth thinking about. You got to know. And it's like, it's one of those things where like, if there's a question, then there's no fucking question. And yeah, just cool. Also, again, like cool that he didn't have that first dab ascent and then let the internet bully him into going back or quote unquote giving it to him or whatever. Like he already knew that he wasn't happy with it, and he wanted to do it in a way that he was happy with and had already done it. And then like to take the opportunity to put it out there to basically make everyone have to think about it and decide for themselves.
I have a question for you guys. Though. Was it actually a dab because he hadn't left the start holds yet? And I think this is the biggest thing that I have considered throughout it, is because he pulls up and then he goes back and then he dabs and then he goes, or is it just a second pull on? Like, did he pull on essentially, like if I pulled on and then sat back down on the ground again and then pulled back on again and then did the move, is that a dab? Because that's essentially what he did. So in that situation, was it a dab? Because I agree. I'm really hard lined with dabs. If he sticks the move and then the foot taps or something like that, like, I do think that ends up being a dab. But if you're still on the start holds, is it? And I think it's a much more interesting question than if it was later on in the problem.
Yeah.
I think
I don't think he dabbed.
You don't think so? I would say I think he did. I think he did because I had two reasons. One, if you got to think about it, like I know there are two different things, but if you think about it by like competition standpoint or whatever, if you pull off the ground, right, it counts as an attempt. So technically, if blah blah blah, right, if he was in a company, it would have been an attempt on his scorecard, whatever. That's totally a separate thing, but it's a relatable. And then two, I think flying starts are still considered like kind of invalid, right? If the first move is hard and you kind of flying start it, then it's kind of similar to a dab in the way. And to me, if you're going to pull on, sit back down and go right away, it's kind of similar to a flying start.
Yeah, I resonate with the flying start thing. I don't agree with the first point just because it doesn't matter in regards to a competition. Like, yeah, we're not calling it a flash. It's not a flash. So I don't think that factors into it. I think that, yes, it becomes more complex when you consider it as like a flying start, which I do agree. I think pulling on in like a stable position is a good way to go, but I think it's a really murky waters on this one. Like I think it's a really hard one. Like, I think that's a good perspective though. I do think like, yeah, that is the other aspect of it is like, would you consider that a flying start? But that's hard. I mean, I've seen a lot worse flying starts and like that are right on the line, that wouldn't be called that. So
I've done a lot.
Me too.
Well, and it's not like if he pulled on and then went back down into the pad with his butt with force, that could have theoretically created
like
a level
bounce.
of rebound.
Oh, well, that's what happened.
Do the
the
move,
shirt folded.
No,
and
yeah.
absorbed it. So
If you look closely, you can see the pad move a little bit.
Oh, does the pad depress? If the
Really?
pad depressed,
It
then
does.
then
He-
it's
that's what-
over.
It's a
It's
dab.
over.
Yeah.
The pad
That's what he was
changes
telling me. He was telling me that's why he was a little more he was a little upset because he butt bounced a little bit.
Then
Oh, I thought it was just shirt. Oh, that changes
that
everything,
changes
dude.
everything.
I just
Okay,
exposed him.
so
Shit.
yeah, that does sound to me like more of a flying start if he did do kind of like a butt bounce essentially, because then you could use like the bounce force to actually get going. I didn't have that information. I didn't have any of that information. That's
Also, what that shows is that he knew, like he must have felt it, and then he went on did, and that's why he came back. Because I think if you really didn't know, I don't know. I feel like, okay. First of all, Will, you just coined a new term. It was first dab ascent. I know. I've really
Nobody
into the world.
That
First
better
dab
not
ascent.
turn into a thing. If that turns into people calling things like day flashes, I'm gonna lose it.
You heard it here first. Will Anglin supports first dab ascent.
first dab ascent.
First dab ascent.
No.
I gotta say something I've seen. I mean, I can totally hear it from all you guys. Is something I've seen all professional climbers is just an unbelievable obsession with having there be no question around their send. Like, just because when I looked at it, you guys, I will say was like, dude, I would have taken that. I mean, again, like I've taken worse, but what does it mean? I've taken it literally means that right? There's no sponsor. No one gives a shit about me. And I love seeing just people hold themselves to an unbelievably high standard. The one that came to mind for me is I watched Ethan Pringle on site this 14A in China. He grabs the finish jug, clips, sits there and shakes out. I don't know why. And then the finish jug rips. And dude, and he bails off it, and he was like, dude, I'm glad I clipped before that jug ripped because I wouldn't have taken it. And I was sitting there thinking, like, if I was on a jug, like, and I knew I was fine, like shaking out, like, I don't know, man, I wouldn't have reclimbed it. I would have been like, I used to say this, I'm like, I had all the fun I could have on that climb. Like, I'm not going back. Like, that's it. And this idea of him dabbing and then going back, like my hunch is, it shows that he's a pro and really wanted no doubt. And I love that. It's not for probably me, where I would be like, dude, my shirt. I mean, what am I even doing wearing a shirt on my limited
Yeah,
sense?
what are you
that's
doing?
That's
Tops
not allowed
off.
anyways.
Come
That's
on.
ridiculous. Yeah. But yeah, props to him. Strong Sung Soo, dude. Kind of coming out of nowhere. I remember seeing him in Bishop this year, and he was just unbelievably strong. I was going to ask you, Austin, you've been around Sung Soo for a while. Like, this guy's trajectory, like, I mean, everyone knows about him. No one, but he kind of came out of nowhere. Like, you've been climbing with a bunch. Like, who is this guy? Like, I mean, what's he doing out there? I mean, he's just crushing everything he tries.
It was kind of new to me too. I mean, I met him not this last year in Bishop when you were there, but the year before that. Yeah, the year before that even he was in Bishop, and he was climbing. I think the hardest thing he did that trip was direct north, maybe, which is like, I mean, it's obviously still super hard, but compared to what he does now, is not super hard for him, right? And he was kind of just another crusher in Bishop who tries the classic V13s and V14s, and then he comes back a year later, and all of a sudden, boom, V16 like that in a few days, like Lucid like that in a few days, and Burden of Dreams in a few days, the hardest climb in the world. And I think it surprised everybody equally. I wish I knew more, but yeah, it was just kind of amazing to me as well.
That's cool.
Yeah, I was like, who is this guy who's just standing under the process, smoking and hanging out in the sun? And then it was like, oh, he's the guy who just did the process like in a few goes. Okay, good job. Yeah, well, amazing ethics, you guys. Thanks for trolling Sung-Soo, exposing people like me for their poor ethics. And yeah, I did like the nuance there. I actually thought it was like a really interesting thing. And this idea of, I think, Carlo, where you're like talking about like the whole flying start thing. And like, if you're still holding on to the start holds, I actually really think there's something there about whether it does count as an attempt in competition, Austin. I actually think, I know, Carlo, you're like, well, it doesn't matter how many attempts, it's not a flash, but something about like how we've decided to sit back, codify what an attempt is, and, agree on that in that setting. I think there's some relevance to applying it where it's like, okay, like if you pull up, you're then established. If then you come down and like you touch or something touches in some ways, then maybe it does become a flying start because it would have been it would have been counted separately.
How long does your ass have to hit the pads again before you starting?
I mean, but the argument would be like
is that
how quickly does the foam rebound? We got to do some experiments. And
when does the force of the foam what kind of foam are you using anyways? Maybe you got like a little spring in there that we don't know about. We're going to have to see these pads.
I got all these messages about like where people started Burden of Dreams, like, with a stacked pad or not. Like, I mean, honestly, you guys, like, this is my hot take is I feel like anytime you have to have that discussion, it's kind of a lame climb in some ways. Like, this is why I love tall climbs or like jump starts. It's like, okay, you jump and you grab on the King Air jug, go for it. Like, I think it's a lame discussion. It makes me feel crappy about our sport when it's like, did you pull on for half a second, make sure that you didn't kind of scrape the dirt on the crux move. I'm like, fuck that boulder. Like, take away 2 stars instantly.
This is like a whole can of worms that I feel like anyone who's been climbing for sufficiently long enough has argued about more than they probably would have liked. And yeah, I mean, you can have the discussion relative to quality where you're like, well, if we have to have that discussion, if there's too much kind of left up for description or interpretation, it's like, well, that's fine. We can have that, but that just means that that's not as good. And better climbs, so to say, are ones where something about them makes that conversation somewhat irrelevant. Like you said, with the King Air jug or whatever. But even then it's like, well, do you have to jump off the dirt? Can you stack 1 pad, 2 pads? How thick is the pad? What kind of foam? Like, you can get annoying about it. But that is one of the things that I think is, I mean, I think it's inherent in our sport, and it can be a negative, or we can lean into it and try and understand it better and just use that as a part of what our sport is, which is a relatively ill-defined activity, which in some senses is negative because it leads to these kinds of controversies or potential controversies or asterisks, or like you get into these arguments about it. But again, like, I think you can take a positive outlook on it. And I think one of the things that is so cool about climbing is how ill-defined it actually is in some of these ways, which allows for a level of creativity or self-expression. And to who, I don't know if Jamie or somebody else coined it first, but just the, like, there's no cheating, there's only lying. Like, as long as you're not obscuring what you've done in some way in order to deceive people or make something out to be like it isn't. I kind of like the lack of boundary in some way. And then you can have competition climbing, which is the same holds, the same people, the same roles, same rules, same day. And then, like, today we see who wins. And then outside of that, it is actually a little bit fluid.
So this almost ties into what Carlo was saying about, like, hey, like, let's not compare art and videos and award like a winner and loser. But the truth is that when we're talking about who this company is going to give a contract to, you know, this guy or this girl, and how they did and what style, like, I think actually does really matter. Like, we can, you know, it's fun to have this like insider baseball chat. You know, Tequila Sunrise, you guys know that totally. Climb in Waco. So when I did it like not starting on that right Waco. I did like Nale did it. And I also just kind of pull on and go, and no one had started it over there. And now I'm like, is my ascent legit or not? Like, who cares? You know, cause it doesn't matter. You guys can all go look at the video of me online, decide if it counts or not. But what if it was $1 million that we're talking about? And so I do, like, while Jamie Emerson, the sheriff, friend of the pod, love his, I love that he cares enough about climbing he tries to codify stuff in bouldering. It's like that thing, like, you need to top it out. And it's like, you can agree or disagree with Jamie on, like, yes, you have to start on the same start holds as everyone else. And then there we get into that stuff like with Chris on Mandala and how he started it versus others jumping off foam or jumping off the dirt. But if we're going to see, like, if our sport continues to grow, it's in the Olympics, it's getting more medals, there's more money behind it. Like, this stuff the community is going to settle on some Schelling point, as I would call it, of like, this is appropriate, this is not. And that's again why I applaud all you guys for actually basically having a really strong internal compass, and whether or not, like Sung Soo too, like whether or not the community agrees or not, doesn't matter. Hold yourself to the highest standard and you're more likely to be on the straight and narrow.
Like, we don't have rules in it. It's more that we have community essentially like agreed upon like standards essentially for what we consider to be an ascent or a flash or an on-site or other things. And really, like, you can have whatever experience you want climbing. You can climb it from one move in and say like, oh, that's kind of what I wanted to do, I don't really care. But to say you sent this problem and to communicate that to people, you're relying upon those kind of agreed upon community principles essentially to promote something that you did. And I think that if you never tell anybody about anything that you did, it just doesn't matter. You know, it's like you can go do whatever you want out in the woods climbing on anything. It just doesn't matter at all. But the minute you start to communicate those things to friends or other people in the community or sponsors or whatever, then you have to be very clear about, at least clear when it deviates from the norm of the agreed upon kind of principles that we have in place for what constitutes a red point or, you know, a send of a problem and whatnot. Because they're, you know, that's when I do something, I definitely, like, I go back and say, is this in line with what has been previously done on it? And if I feel like what I did was to a higher moral standard or ethical standard, then I usually will outline why I think that it is or not. And then if I don't believe that it fits that, then, you know, I'll try and go back and try and do something that is a little bit closer to the community agreed upon, you know, kind of standard for what was defined there. So it's complex, but I do think it does, like Will was saying, it revolves mostly around who you communicate, if you communicate it to somebody else about what you did, how you communicate it, and then, you know, what you may decide to leave out, because there's a lot that I think people just don't, just leave things out in terms of their style of ascent or how they approached it, that they know people are just going to assume something based off of what they said. And you know, they try and navigate kind of in that gray area a lot. And I don't agree with that. I think it's, you know, it's lying by omission, essentially.
For sure.
Okay, just to be really difficult on this though, is like the more we get obsessed with doing things in the right style, like, so you're communicating to the world, you're saying I'm following the community standards. I would argue that's almost like what we're trying to say is not so cool, where it's like, stop being so obsessed with the grade. It's like, well, who cares if Sung-Soo shirt dab? Who cares? Like, isn't it dope what he did? Like, who cares? And so, like, the more we emphasize ethics and style, like, the more I feel like we're reinforcing that idea that grades matter, how you do it matter. That's all that matters in climbing. And it's like distilling it to, you know, like this, like, that's why we can call it a V17, because your shirt didn't dab. Had your shirt dab, that was a 16.8, and you know, and that's all that matters.
Well, I don't think like the style and the grade are equivalent,
but they are if you have to meet a certain bar, right? Like, because you can't, like, I know what you're saying, where that's where I love the insider baseball. It's like, oh, you did it during summer, you did it in those conditions. It's like, it doesn't matter. No one's going to be like, I'm going to upgrade it for you then. But we all know, we all know.
Yeah, we all know Rustam did Hypno in the summer.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Dude,
That's crazy.
That is crazy, by the way.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Shout out to Rustam.
Yeah, shout out to Rustam.
All right. Sorry.
No,
all right, you guys don't
I
have
think
to.
it's a fair point. I think it's a fair point,
difficult.
Josh, and I think I agree. I just think, you know, especially when it within the context of being a professional in the sport, or if you're looking for some sort of like accreditation for your accomplishments and whatnot, then you should at least be trying to like hit the ethical bar of the first ascensionists. And if the first ascensionists didn't dab while they did it, then you're trying to achieve an ascent that is at least equal to that, you know. And if you're not, then I don't think you're quite hitting it, or at least you just need to tell people that you had something there that subtracts from that original bar that was set, you know.
For sure. I think that's super fair. Yeah.
All right. You guys know me. I'm just trying to be difficult. Yeah, that's good. That's, I think the thing it all made me think of is that sometimes, I mean, I totally chased grades and style at one point, really wanted to be like, I want to make it very clear that I am this good at this climb and I can do it, and there's no questions asked. And then I'll go to Font, Carlo, and I'll leave the guidebook in my backpack, and I'm just straight up climbing. And this is one of the reasons why I love deepwater soloing too, is you enter into this thing, like, you may know where the line is supposed to go to get the grade, but you may be freaked out and you're just trying to get to the top, dude. You just want to not die or not take the plunge. And I like, that will get me back in touch with that kind of like, just, I feel like when we first went to the climbing gym, or we first walked up to a tree, like, you didn't care about tape, you didn't care about grades. You see kids or adults their first time at the gym, they're like, oh, I got to the top of that wall. And I think, like, I don't want to lose that about climbing. And I feel like sometimes as we obsess on that, and if that's how you brought up in the sport, you kind of lose just that up mentality. I don't know, like, let's go up, guys.
You know, and I think that's a wonderful part. That's one of my favorite parts about deepwater soloing too, is that exploratory thing. But I'm also not, after an ascent like that, where I'm kind of just meandering all over the wall, I'm not like, oh, I climbed this route. You know, I'm not telling people like, yeah, I did Es Pontas, even though I climbed like zigzags across the wall looking for different rests and doing this. You know, it's like, it's not the line that got climbed, you know? And so I think it's purely just in the communication, and yeah, it's like, do what you want to do. Go have fun out there. Like, enjoy that process. I agree. But that doesn't mean you're going to tell everybody you did this one thing, that if that ascent was something very, very different from it.
And if it's your livelihood to go out and
that's
perform
a huge point
on these things, and then have the community kind of like glean value from that and support you in your efforts to continue doing that, like, you also have to assume that you're going to get held to whatever the highest standard is. And you can't be, you can have the feeling of being mad, but it's not justified in my opinion. If you've decided to take that upon yourself and make that your career and be a professional climber, and it's like, yeah, like we have expectations for you to get to go do all this stuff, like effectively on our dime. Like we expect certain things. And so I think that it's, you can have those different things, you know, like there's I think computerized line judges now at like the US Open, but like when we go shred the pickleball court down the street, like we just let it slide either way. We're like, I don't know, like let's just keep playing or redo the point or whatever. And it's like, well, because we're just hanging out, messing around, like no one's getting paid and whatnot. And when it gets to a professional level, yeah, you just got to expect to be held to a higher standard, and you ought to communicate, you know, as honestly as you can about what has been done. And then the thing in climbing is the community kind of gets to judge, and that just sort of is what it is.
Yeah, Jamie didn't get his name the sheriff for nothing. And good Temps will call you out too. I guess we're gonna
no more shirt dabs.
We're gonna have an opinion. Yeah, shirt's off.
Wait. The shirt wasn't the problem. It was the butt
true.
hitting
It
behind
was-
the shirt,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
A shirt doesn't depress foam. I don't know, you know?
Yeah. Carlo loves shirt dabs. You heard it here.
You heard it here.
Depends on the
Fully
shirt.
endorsed.
You know, these stiffer shirts nowadays, they're like much thicker. I do think they provide a little bit more bounce. Like we may have a problem.
They
with
are
those.
heavier though.
Yeah, they're
They are
heavier. That's true. They're heavier. That's true. Yeah. You don't
Training
get the
weight.
extra points for the training weight.
This is the new technology. This is the new vision of the youth, is bouncing off your
Is this
shirt.
the nuance that you want in the World Cup commentary, Will Anglin? Is the weight of the weight of the shirt material and how that's affecting?
They got to start regulating those jerseys. Is all I'm saying.
Yeah, I'm glad that we addressed that. That's very important. Good. All right. Well,
sorry to cut you off, but Austin just got back from, kind of a newer climbing area in Idaho. That kind of area piqued my interest a bit, like a couple years ago, and I started seeing some photos leak out, and I just haven't had time to travel, but I just want to hear more about it. What's the deal?
yeah, set it up. I want to hear too.
All right. Well, it was pretty sick. I won't lie. I mean, I don't get to climb on granite that often, so doing a whole trip for it was pretty cool. And we had Matt there, like, giving us the tour of all his favorite boulders, and even Kokoro Fuji was there. Kokoro, like, world champion at one point, got to come along, and it was like he did his first 8C that trip, actually, believe it or not. That was his first one. But
That's amazing.
the zone is pretty sick. The main wall in the zone is like this big highball wall with all these like beautiful slashes through it that have a bunch of dinos and like some crimping on it. That wall was amazing rock. Like, honestly, like, really good. Some of the best I've climbed on. And Matt has another project on that wall that he's working on that is supposed to be like 8C or something. But there's a few link-ups on there. It's not like the most inspiring, probably line-wise, because there's a few link-ups. I know some people aren't in love with that, but the rock was amazing. And then there's some other high balls like the Listen thing with the dino at the top with the orange rock. That thing is incredible. We didn't get to try it, but that one looked world-class. And Matt even put up some like really hard boulders. Like there's two V15s right next to each other down the hill. The wall's a little less impressive, but the rock is just as good, and the moves are amazing. I don't know, maybe, correct me if I'm wrong, but I know granite doesn't really form a lot of like sculpted holds often, but this zone seemed to be pretty sculpted.
Cool.
What do you mean by sculpted?
A lot of the crimps that you grab are like rounded, and a lot of them are like, there's some pinches that are like meant to be pinches, it feels like. And some of the slots just feel like they were made to be climbed on, even though they're fully natural. And yeah, it kind of feels like, at least the little bit I've climbed on granite, it doesn't feel similar to that granite I've climbed on.
And what's the area called again?
It's a Cascade, Idaho. It's basically like this one hillside.
And where's it at exactly?
It's about 2 hours north of Boise.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, it's
And
in the
is there a
mountain
lot
town
to
of
do
Cascade.
there, or is it like a lot of boulders on this hillside, or is it kind of like a small amount that's got just like really high quality, or is it kind of like endless if you just keep hiking, or what's kind of the feel there?
I don't think it's necessarily endless, but there's a lot of zigzaggy roads up the mountain. Like we were at the lowest zone, and you can drive mountain roads a little higher. And there's a bunch of roads in there. And Matt was telling us that there's some zones that he's only climbed at one day, and there's a bunch of projects there. And yeah, I wish I had a better answer, but I don't think it's endless. But there's definitely a lot more to be done.
Yeah, that's awesome. And what was the weather like while you were there?
It was better than the Northeast. It was still pretty mosquito-y and warm and shit, but it was basically, it was like, it's almost at 5,000 feet, the low zone, and the higher zone is a little higher. It was probably 70 degrees. Yeah, it's not too high, but alpine for Idaho probably.
So Kokoro is sending V15 in like 70-degree heat on granite? That's crazy.
Dude, it was crazy. It was like the way we did the trip, we only had 3 days to climb. So day 1, we tried the V15, and Kokoro and I like worked out the moves, and the crux was hard. I don't think either of us did it that day. Then day 2, we went back, and I kind of figured out the crux, and then Kokoro unlocked the crux, and first try, sticking the crux from the ground, just took it to the top. It was insane.
Holy shit. That's amazing.
He's gonna climb some hard boulders.
He's so good. Looking forward to his outdoor era as well.
Yeah, me too.
That's awesome. Cool, man. Thanks for the lowdown. That's awesome to hear. It's cool to see more coming out of a new area. I just love granite zones like that, so it's cool to see something new.
Yeah, I think you'll be psyched.
Also cool to see Matt Foltz develop a new area. Like, it sounds like he's really in love with that place. When I talked to him last, it sounded like he's going to stay there. He's not going to move. Like, this is going to be his backyard. And I just love when people, especially of that caliber, go into a place and then just make it this beautiful area for whoever comes next. And yeah, dude, remember he told me about some of those 15s. Didn't he put up 2 of them in a day, which is a wild thing to do? 2 V15 FAs in a day. And I'm kind of curious, when you saw Kokoro and Matt climbing, I think of them as being, I mean, Kokoro is famous for comp climbing. Matt actually did just fine in comps, but I think of him more as that like bearing down on those little crimps. Like, what do they look like climbing side by side on that same style?
It's more, I feel like it's actually more similar than you expect. Kokoro might just be like good at everything. Yeah, I mean, I didn't really watch Kokoro try anything that looked, actually, the only thing I watched Kokoro try that looked hard for him was this one V11 that was just face vert crimping that Matt did pretty easily.
Matt is really good at small holds in a way that I think is pretty surprising when you watch him climb. He's seen him do some kind of insane, he did TB1 kitten paws. Like, that's a disgusting boulder problem, but and he did it, and he wouldn't have been the guy who I would have picked like out of a lineup to like, oh yeah, that guy's gonna do like the hardest board crimp problem I've ever seen.
Yeah, I mean, Will and I are in some. No, thank you. Will and I are in some tension board group chat, and they still talk about Matt doing kin paws as like the most impressive thing of all time. I think only one other person has done it, and it's my buddy Anant, who's like super light and super skinny, and like that's his style.
Okay, guys, we covered the docket. If we start going down boards as another tangent,
we got another month
until episode number 3. Yeah. Well, another month. That's my only complaint. I had so much fun on the first one, the second one. I wish I didn't have to wait to see you guys all together again. And Austin, thanks for talking more shit this time. I'm glad I could still be big media, and that's a blast, you guys. I'm sure there'll be lots of big news that we will forget to cover in this one and in the next one, but we'll do our best. And that was fun. That was super fun.
Oh yeah. Thanks,
Good temps.
Thanks. Good temps.
Good temps. Thanks for tuning in. If you'd like even more content, go to patreon.com/testpiece. And while you're at it, share this podcast with someone you know who would love it. And please leave us a review or rating at wherever you get your podcasts. We've also got tons of great content on YouTube and Instagram, so don't forget to like and subscribe there. Okay, see you next week.